Hi guys, welcome back to today's YouTube video. So this channel is just starting out. I'm just gonna say this right now, so just no hate, okay guys? No hate. The story today is called The Unicorn Killer, and this is a whack story, okay? So Ira Samuel Ehorn was born on May 15th, 1940. He was an ecological anti-war activist, hippie guru. So basically, he was just like a really big hippie. Ira became an activist in the 1960s to the 70s-ish. He was very involved with the ecological and anti-war groups. He also claimed to be instrumental in creating Earth Day, but people involved with creating the Earth Day ended up after all of this, they ended up saying psh, we don't even know him. Friends and supporters nicknamed him the Unicorn due to his last name meaning unicorn in German. I was born in a middle-class Jewish family and developed into a bona fide left-wing radical. Some people, not everyone, agreed with him, but he didn't really care. He kind of just stayed on his decision. So he was only 20 at the time, so simple and a prominent figure. He was head of the youth-driven movement in the 60s, standing in opposition of America's involvement with the Cold War. It's basically saying that his group of youth, 18, 20-year-olds in there kind of, were standing against in opposite of the Cold War and America's involvement with it. They didn't want any involvement with this war in the Vietnam War. Also recognized him as Philadelphia's head hippie, described as a large burly man with electric blue eyes and an unkempt beard. He also barely washed, so that kind of makes sense why he was kind of filthy looking, because he was a hippie. Gives you shits. He was a master of rhetoric, networking, and these skills drew important famous people in. So these people will be very important later into the story. Revered and admired by many of the leading He was revered and admired by many of the leading intellectuals, friends with the authors of the Beat Generation known as Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac. He was also known to mix with celebrities socially, like Isaac Asimov, Peter Gabriel, and Uri Geller. Isaac Asimov was an American writer and professor of biochemistry at Boston University. Peter Brian Gabriel is an English musician, singer, and songwriter, and activist. So you can already kind of see why they would be friends, because they were kind of into the same stuff. Geller is an Israel-British illusionist, musician, television personality, and self-proclaimed psychic. Ira also hung out with the Yippie, also known as Youth International Party, including the founders, Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin. Now, it is rumored to be that they were actually pretty close, and they actually ended up living together for a little bit before they kicked him out. And Ira was very involved with political groups, along with being a pot-smoking LSD addict while also living free-loving, because he's a hippie. At this time, he was holding a fellowship at Harvard Kennedy School of Government and had a 5-year relationship with Helen, also known as Holly, Maddox. Helen was a brilliant student attending Bryn Mawr College in Tyler, Texas. She was a beautiful, graceful woman. Was a former cheerleader, but then turned her energies to the women's liberation movement. Ira treated Helen super poorly, just like past girlfriends. His behavior extended to physical abuse from verbal and controlling. One ex-girlfriend reported he had smashed a pop bottle over her head and attempted to strangle another. Tired of Ira's bullshit, Helen took off to New York and became involved with Saul Lapidus. Now, thinking, well, she's safe, right? This is where the story ends. She's safe in New York, she's away from this abusive asshole, it's all good. Well, no, it's not. He calls Ira from New York, ending their 5-year relationship for good. Ira completely loses it over this and threatens to pack up the rest of her belongings and throw it out onto the street. Unfortunately, Helen returned to him on September 9th to Philadelphia to collect her belongings and was never seen again. That she was to have been murdered on or around September 9th or 10th, 1977, and no one except her family noticed the sudden disappearance. That's kind of weird. Like, how did nobody else notice her just kind of disappear? Only her family noticed her disappearance. Like, Helen would contact her mom, like, on a daily basis. Like, they were, like, best friends. They're tight. She'd call all the time. So when her mom's birthday came and went, that's when they got a little worried because they didn't get a phone call. So she became anxious about her daughter's continued silence. And the family notified the police and immediately started pointing fingers at Ira. And the police, however, lazily questioned him and then left him alone after that. Like, they were like, okay, well, this guy pretty much, like, he doesn't know what's going on, because he told the police that she had left to make a phone call and then never returned. So they're like, okay, well, he's the boyfriend of, like, 5 years, so maybe, like, he doesn't know anything either. Like, she just up and left. Disappointed in the results of the police investigation, the Maddox family hired 2 private detectives to investigate. By 1979, they pieced enough circumstantial evidence to give to the police for a search warrant. The evidence included Ira requesting help from friends to dispose of a trunk full of secret documents, being non-cooperational with police investigators, and a rancid brown liquid leaking into the apartments below him. So neighbors were starting to, like, notice this, like, rancid smell coming from their, like, upstairs neighbors', like, apartments. Like, they were, like, saying that, like, it was, like, seeping down into their kitchen below. Like, it was gross, and it smelled horrible. So neighbors were starting to, like, notice this, and so his alibi of she just went to go get a phone call, like, totally, like, out the bed. On March 28th, 1979, almost 20 months after Helen first disappeared, Mike Chitwood led the investigation of Ira's home. In the closet, Mike found Helen's suitcase, handbag, driver's license, and social security card. Deeper in the closet was a trunk. When Mike opened up the trunk, he found Helen's body packed with styrofoam, air fresheners, and newspapers. Her body was partially mummified and her skull had been smashed multiple times. And they say she was still semi-conscious when he had put her in the trunk and had died trying to claw her way out. When they arrested Ira, he had shrugged it off and simply said, "You found what you found." And he was later charged with murder, so. Ira was so involved politically. His little rich friends, they got him a really good lawyer, and his name was Arlen Specter, who got him a set bail of $40,000, and only 10% had to be paid for him to be a walking man again. Now, how do you just get bail on a murder case? Like, it's not normal for murderers to get a set bail. Like, it's just random. So Ira went on to tell everybody and anybody that would listen that this was a conspiracy by the CIA or FBI who wanted to discredit him for and halt his political activities. So now I'm just gonna go over a brief timeline of everything that happened, because we think the story ends of him just paying that set bail and then leaving. Like, no, it gets even crazier. Like, so here's just like a brief timeline of what's going on. So in 1981, Ira evaded bail, so he paid his bail or whatever, and then, like, escaped to Europe. Like, he was like, I'm out of here, days before the trial of the crime. And he lived in Europe for about 16 years, marrying Annika Fladen. And then in 1993, the state convicted him in absentia for the murder of Helen and was sentenced to life without parole, but he's still in Europe, so he really doesn't care. Yeah, so. In 1993, the state convicted him for the murder of Helen, like, back in Philadelphia, and sentenced him to life without parole, but he's still in Europe, so. In 1997, he was tracked down and arrested in Champagne-Mouton, France, living under the name Eugene Malin. In France, the laws are a little bit different, and they say that they would not give Ira to the States until they promised no execution. And on finally, July 20th, 2001, Ira was finally deported to the U.S. after the French authorities were promised a fair trial and no death penalty. During the trial, he was allowed to speak on his behalf, and he claimed that Helen was murdered by CIA agents who were trying to frame him, all because of his investigation on the Cold War and psychotronics. The jury found him guilty and affirmed his conviction on October 17, 2002. Judge William Mazzola sentenced Ehorn to life in prison without parole, and he is currently incarcerated at Hootsdale State Prison in Pennsylvania. And that is the story of the Unicorn Killer.